The Dire Wolf Show will be with you guys shortly after we come back from these technical difficulties. Dire will be live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, Wolfpack. Direwolf here for our weekly news recap, which is not so weekly as of recent from behind enemy
Super
lines.
hyper duper weekly.
It is a number of weeks. That's close. Behind enemy lines on YouTube for now, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized, and we have been demonetized as well as had our stream shut down a few times. Alongside me is my co-host Fox Trevize. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. How are you doing?
I'm doing fan freaking tastic. Best, Sunday this week.
Yeah, all week, every week.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you already know that the culture in the military and what's going on around the world kind of sucks for me, but I am happy to be on the show and happy to talk about the news with our wonderful followers. Among you guys, thank you very much for everyone who supports us financially. Just watching, liking, and subscribing. That's enough. I very much appreciate it. And I know Fox does as well.
Don't speak for me. Yes, I do.
Well, I had on good authority that you appreciated it. I don't think we're long for YouTube. I've told you guys many times we've already had our stream shut down because of them not liking our content. And we're not going to change our content. One nice thing is they told us recently that they're no longer censoring talk about the elections being rigged, or any cynicism or criticism of the election system. They no longer, at least they say they're no longer, are censoring that or taking those videos down or giving you strikes for it. Interesting move. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's obviously in preparation for the next election.
Yeah.
And their perceived, I don't know, probably lack of performance during that next election. And you know, when DeSantis wins, it'll be a-okay to question the integrity of the elections. Though, while you are allowed to talk about potential election interference now, they are still a little wary about discussing how half the Ukrainian soldiers have Nazi emblems on their helmets.
Yeah, don't worry. They can fix that by putting tape over it.
Yes, the anti-Nazi tape.
And you know what? Thank God, though, it's the American soldiers aren't having to fight with Nazis, right?
Yeah, that'd be awful. So is that literally putting a Band-Aid over the Nazi problem?
I don't know. It is definitely covering up the fact that we are financially supporting and maybe more literal Nazis.
Not like figurative ones, not like imaginary ones looking for Subway sandwiches at 2 a.m. on a snowy Chicago night.
It's not even like satirical Nazis or people who like their clothing because they think it's fashionable. Not people who LARP as Nazis. It's literal Nazis who believe in the ideology of Nazism.
Yes. Oopsies.
I didn't realize until I started listening off. There is a lot of a abnormal amount of people who, do like Nazi stuff that are not literally Nazis. I hadn't really thought about that until just now. In any case, so I think it is a twofold plan. First off, I think that they very much, because it's always okay for the Democrats to deny elections. Even in this last election, there were Democrats who said we lost because the other side cheated, and that wasn't a problem. It's always fine for Democrats to question the validity of elections, but it's never okay for Republicans to do. In fact, it's a crime, they say. It is un-American, it's undemocratic to dare criticize, flaws in an election system.
It's potentially even illegal.
Yeah, demanding that people actually show that they have an ID showing that they are at least Americans who live in the state they're voting in. Demanding that's undemocratic. That's racist, and what other ists you want to throw in there. Demanding any kind of tiny monicum of election security, that is wrong and possibly criminal, definitely hateful. But them saying that they lost because it was rigged and unfair, that's fine. So what they're doing is, by saying that it's okay to talk about it now, is they are allowing themselves to say that it was rigged when they lose the next election, if they lose. And also, I think some of them are banking on people hearing that people on the right hearing the elections are rigged and feeling that, well, then there's no point in voting if it's rigged anyways. I think that their goal, the Marxist goal, has always been and continues to be to wear you down to make you give up.
And for some reason, a certain sect of Republicanism and Republican candidates at the current moment seem to be leaning into that, continuing the narrative that your vote doesn't matter. I guess time will tell if that's an effective strategy. I tend to think that it's not. I tend to think that the people who are telling you that your vote does matter and are attempting to pass and have in some cases passed laws and regulations that ensure that your vote matters and that it's counted in a fair and secure way. I personally, I think that is the way forward. But, I could be wrong. Maybe no Republicans voting at all in the next election cycle. Maybe that's just like a secret dark horse way of winning. What do I know, though?
I doubt it. So Trevor said that there's lots of people who like Japanese stuff. Yeah, weebs, but aren't Japanese. They're like the Nazi version of weebs. Yeah, I was in Germany recently. I don't know if I told you this story, but on the base, there was a German a person who's had a little booth inside the BX there, the base exchange, and they were selling, among other things, a memorabilia, a single German Nazi uniform. And I took a picture of it because I thought this seems so odd because why would you sell a German uniform on a U.S. military base in Germany? I'm pretty sure German insignias are like illegal in Germany. I just the whole thing seemed really strange to me. I had to take a picture of it.
My town has a charming individual in it who walks around continuously dressed in a full Nazi officer uniform, and does First Amendment audits of various small businesses. Um,
Oh my God.
Very charming.
Jeez Louise.
One of the town favorites.
Wow. That's interesting.
It is, yes.
Holy shit. So let's move on to our first story. How about that?
Yeah, let's give that a go. Which is more less of a story, more of a topic of discussion.
Yeah, more of a topic. So there's a secret war over our economy. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of it, but it's true.
Wait, did we skip over our funny comment?
Oh, should we hash it? I thought that was from last week.
Is it?
Well, last 5 weeks ago.
Well, let's see what it is. I don't know what it is. It's just a link. I'm in IT, so you're supposed to click on random links.
And so for all this...
Oh, it is kind of funny. It's just like, I don't remember what this was. It's just...
Oh shit! It's Oh yeah, I remember this.
And so for all this talk of chaos, I just didn't see it. Not from my perch. At one point during the evacuation, there was an aircraft taking off full of people, Americans and Afghans alike, every 48 minutes. And not one single mission was missed. So I'm sorry, I just don't buy the whole argument of chaos. And so for
aircraft taking off, the plane was basically hijacked by randos that broke onto the airfield.
Yes, but it was very orderly hijacking. It was not chaotic in any way, Dyer.
Killed a bunch of American soldiers. That wasn't chaos to you?
That's just like your opinion, man.
No, a second. You dropped a bomb on an aid worker and killed a bunch of kids.
That was intentional.
If there was no chaos, it had to be intentional, right? I thought the argument was, fog of war, it was chaos, it was a fast-moving situation, mistakes happened. No. Oh, there was no chaos, and then that was completely on purpose. That explains a lot. Fuck you, dude. What the wrong with you? I don't think you could talk to anyone who was on the ground describing what the situation was like, and have any word except for chaos.
And that phrase could easily describe the current economy, which is our next topic.
Right. Thanks for reining me back in there. Okay, so
segue.
ESG is an effort to use stakeholder capitalism, which, by the way, anytime you put a modifier on a word, it's no longer that word. It's no longer capitalism. So stakeholder capitalism to remake society, and is do that to combat the normal consciousness and power of the free market. They're using stakeholder capitalism to combat the free market and destroy it. So you may have heard, we're not going to do full stories on these. There's a lot of stories like this, but of wokeism in companies. Like Bud Light recently working with a quote unquote trans influencer that targets children. And we had Target selling trans/LGBT clothes for kids and in a section with kids stuff. We had Gillette a while back running an ad, multiple ads, attacking men based on the lies of toxic masculinity and rape culture. We have had sports leagues allowing men to compete against women. The list could go on of all the different companies and them going woke at the detriment of their companies/organizations. And the reason why they're doing this is all the same reason, and it's ESG. These are examples, and many more are examples of ESG, the environmental, social, and governance rating that are provided by global investment companies, including MSCI, Sustain Analytics, Gartner, Foster Research, and a few others I can't pronounce. So these companies influence other companies by only allowing investments from their massive funds into companies that maintain high ESG scores. You get ESG scores by kowtowing to the woke, running commercials that are woke, having DEI offices and officers and policies. These investment firms, they look at these companies and they determine, have they sufficiently kowtowed to the woke? Have they signaled that they support wokeism enough to get a high score? And if they get a high score, they get access to a large investment fund that buys their stocks and gives them more access to revenue.
And it's important to remember too that investment fund isn't like, I don't know, some like benefactor who like invented a good product or something like that. Like, no, most of the time that money, that investment fund is coming from your 401ks, your pension funds. It's your retirement fund. It's your money in the tune of hundreds of billions to trillions of dollars that exist in retirement funds, that this ESG practice is being used to guide that money. All of that money that you've saved for your retirement is now being used against you and your family under the guise of ESG.
Correct. So before, the free market survives on your money being spent on what you support and what you want. You can vote with your dollar by choosing not to buy from a company that does things you don't like. Or you can vote with your dollar buying a product that you think is superior for some reason or another. However, by having these big investment funds where it takes all of your guys' retirement funds, my retirement fund, everyone's retirement fund, and then we've given them access to our money to decide for us what to support. And then we don't know that these companies have decided to take all of our money, the power we've entrusted in them, they're using it to work against us by pressuring companies into supporting woke gender and racial ideology. Not only is it pressuring them to signal by making commercials or doing ad deals with a fake trans person, they actually is pressuring them to have internal policies of, having racial quotas or trying to get more men, black men and women, or whatever group into leadership. They are actually changing the structures of these companies because the boards of those companies want to have access to your money from your investments that you've entrusted to these giant investment companies, these investment funds that now are using their power to change society.
Yes, and how you stated it, that's how it started, was racial hiring quotas, and then it turned into not just how many minorities do we want to hire, but how many straight white men do we want to fire. And then it got pushed further as into what kinds of products are even being created, what kinds of content and materials are being created, and we're seeing this onslaught of these very strange television shows being created for children, where you're seeing all kinds of weird sexual practices being done for children's content to expose them to that stuff early. You're seeing devices like chest binders or tucking swimsuits now being marketed and advertised towards kids who barely even have those parts to begin with because they're so young.
Yes.
And so you've had this morph from 5 to 10 years ago. It was kind of about bringing in people to work at these companies that they thought would start pushing their goals. And over time, it morphed into getting rid of the people who would put the brakes on those goals. And now they're in the phase where they're executing on those goals.
You might find yourself looking at these companies and saying to yourself, no one asked for this. There is no demand for this, because you and every rational person don't want that. and don't support it. And they're like, well, who are they marketing to? There is no demand for this. But you're wrong, because ESG creates an artificial demand with your dollars, as if you were demanding it, but someone's doing it on your behalf. They create an artificial demand for this content that you don't oppose, that you don't support. And so, yeah, sure, 90% of the people, the population, might oppose it, but 90% of the money supports it. That's the problem. Yes, there are plenty of true believers that support woke ideology. We have colleges pumping them out constantly. A person without critical thinking is produced every single minute in these universities, and they support the woke ideology. But many of these companies are acting out of fear and coercion. They were coerced to gain a good ESG score. These companies' boards are pressured into hiring woke leadership and creating DEI offices designed to realign their business from the top down to be more woke. Essentially, the political and social goals of a small number of rich, powerful people using your money as their power use vast amounts of investment capital to change the behavior, leadership, and culture of these businesses. Again, can't put stuff enough. They can only do this because they're doing it on your behalf, on my behalf, against our will. By the time this process has played out, and you can be certain this has played out in most big corporations, the roots of wokeness will go so deep into the structure and culture of the business that you would need to completely gut it and start over if you ever wanted to save the company. It is in the DNA of the company at this point. It's been going on for so long. At this point, you'd have to ask yourself, are these companies even worth saving? In some cases, you might say yes. In the case of Twitter, Elon Musk said, yes, it's worth saving. But look what the length Elon Musk had to go through to de-wokeify Twitter. And even after firing most of the staff and replacing most of the staff, he's still having to battle with his own company, who censored recently Daily Wire's documentary, What is a Woman? His own company that he has been very clear about being opposed to censorship. His own company censored something because it went against the woke ideology, and he had to go in and fire someone else again months later after already taking over and changing out most of the leadership and most of the staff. He's still battling it because the woke ideology is still in the DNA of the company. He's still having to eradicate it. And how many companies can have the kind of turnover and restart like Twitter had without dying? Very few companies could survive the changeover. So ESG is a tool used by stakeholder capitalism to change society. Stakeholder capitalism is advertised as a way of operating a business where the shareholders are only one of many people whose interests need to be considered when operating the business. The other parties supposedly are every other group in society. It is essentially the way they advertise it, governing with a social consciousness, like taking care of your community and making decisions that won't harm your community. That's the way the flowery way they advertise it. But that's not how it works out. Instead, it is placing the goals of political and social advancement and change, those goals of very few people in power, those political and social goals of a very small number of people, over the interests of the investor. So it's not we're going to worry about the interest of all of our society and we're going to make business decisions that supports everyone equally. No, it ends up being we're going to support the Democrats and their messaging, and we're going to support abortion, we're going to support trans ideology, and then we're going to actively oppose other segments of society. That's what it ends up being, right? Ends up supporting racial equity and gender equity and belief systems that are based on lies and they're meant to try to subvert and destroy our culture, which could some people would argue is really just a stepping stone in trying to have force a revolution in our country by getting people to hate our country and our society and demand change. This is how they justify sacrificing a company's profitability to advance unpopular social and political goals. The stakeholder capitalism is how they justify it. They are saying it's no longer about being a profitable company. It's about supporting these other stakeholders, which are really just the political goals of these rich elite. Those things take precedence over a functioning, profitable company. So when you ask yourself, why would they do something that is obviously not going to help the company be profitable? It is eliminating possible customers. It's definitely alienating possible customers, because for them, the people who believe in this stakeholder capitalism, they don't actually care about being profitable. They care about changing society.
Yes, the ability of controlling society, having that much influence, being able to have influence over the politics is of far more value than the economy.
If the company collapses, that doesn't matter to the investment company, who will already have pulled out their stock and moved it somewhere else where they can influence them there. They don't care.
Yeah. But yeah, it's that control aspect that is the real value and kind of the underlying motive for this ESG thing.
Yes, it's both. These companies want to have the initial investment where they want to have companies be able to buy their stocks because they need to have good ESG score to have their stocks purchased by these investment companies. But also for all those companies who already have been invested into by these big firms, there's also the threat of if your score drops, if you get a bad score, we're going to sell off your stock and remove you from our portfolios. That would be extremely damaging to a company that already has them invested into it, right?
Yep.
So there's the carrot and the stick. So the lie is that they have is that capitalism naturally requires that a company sacrifice the well-being of customers and employees for profit. And though some companies definitely can do that, that is not a feature of capitalism. When in reality, a company is likely to be more profitable if its employees are taken care of and its customers are happy with the product or service they receive. It doesn't make sense to give a shitty product and that people will stop buying unless, of course, the government is subsidizing you and you're the only option. So Bud Light would be better if it focused on providing the best beer. It's Bud Light, not best beer, best value on beer. And Gillette would be better if it focused on providing the best value on razors. And EA would be better if they focused on producing at least one good game.
I'm sure that. Yeah, I'm sure that's good. All right. So this drive to induce social change is based on Marxist ideology. And there's a couple of key outgrowths from Marxism, and those would be communism and fascism. I know that there's a lot of misgivings as to what fascism actually is these days, but I think we know what that is. It's the lucrative merger of the state and the corporation, and so really, I mean, I know you wrote communism in there, Dyer, but that's more of a fascist issue, which is actually even scarier. Communism, it's easy to see coming because the government just comes in and just takes everything over. Fascism is a little bit more devious in that it's harder to see coming. It looks a lot like what has just happened, where you have these corporations maintaining their own individuality and their own autonomy, and then they're choosing to create this new social political force or encouragement over the population.
It's fascist now. They're using that as a tool because their actual goal is the removal of private companies, though.
Yeah,
it is going towards communism. They ironically the communists, the Marxists are hoping to use fascism as a way to get communism.
Yeah, but those kind of end goals are kind of they're too far outside, especially after we've tested that with 100 million deaths over the last century. The communism and Marxism is clearly just kind of too big brained for the modern man. That must be why it's never worked correctly before. Well, real communism has just never been tried. And it's mostly because we would need to have a re-engineered human, a new man, a Ubermensch, if it were. The new man that will be equipped for this brave new world that they want to create. A world where you will own nothing and you will be happy. Of course, they know you won't be that person who sits in the pod and eats the bugs and enjoys the freedoms that come with your servitude and your control. No, they see independent-minded people like us as being in the way, obstacles to be removed. They want us to die off and be replaced by the future generations of good communists, which, we all have very different definitions of what a good communist is. Yes, future generations who grow up in a world where they will know nothing different than the communism that they live under. That is always been the goal of the attempts at revolution over the last century. Is you have to eliminate the generation that took place in the revolution, and you have to assert absolute control over the birth and education of the next generation.
That's why they focus so much on destroying the previous culture. You look at China; they had the Great Leap Forward. The
Nazis had a concept of Jahrnull, which is year zero, and that's actually even been pulled over into American English as a concept that leftists has had, where they call it just year zero, and that means that history starts now. You need to forget all previous history. There's no connection to the past. There's only the future, and the future is only the party. Any connections to the past have to be illegal, and that's what we've seen attempts at previous times, and they certainly are trying to do that again. You start seeing the kind of proto phase of that, the test cases with all the censorship on social media and the internet. And now they're moving into changing the education system, and it'll just go further and further and further until you have generations where they just don't know what the true history of America was prior to.
We're so close to that. We're at a tipping point right now. Like they've already demonstrated that they can make a extremely important story with lots and lots of evidence completely disappear and not be like, they completely remove all discussion about it, right? Except for in extreme fringe areas, those fringe areas they want to completely remove. But they envision a world, a tech what's the word the when it's a tyranny, technocracy, yeah,
yes.
Where they have complete control over what can be talked about, and even though some people may,
it's more than that. It's because what they're looking for, what we've had in the past is authoritarianism, where they want to control what you do, and to a certain extent control what you talk about
and what you think.
Well, no, that's totalitarianism. What we have is totalitarianism, where that extends even further into what you're even allowed to think about. And it's just total control of society, down to what are your thoughts and beliefs, what are acceptable and unacceptable by the party. And really until recently, just haven't had the technological capacity to actually implement something like that. Humans just were limited. They were limited until recently, just due to the technology that was at hand. But with modern technology, you now can start implementing that totalitarianism at that granular thought-based level. And that's what we're seeing happening.
And right now, you see how willing they are to lie about everything, no matter how unimportant is they lie as easily as they do breathing, and they just take for granted that they can do so. They can spin any narrative they want. They can make any truth they want because they have power to control what you have access to. If they actually limited our access to any other contrary information, they would have complete control over us, Because you might say, oh, I'm a critical minded person, but you can only make decisions. You can only think things based on information you are provided with and evaluating it. And yeah, you might still evaluate what you receive, but if they make all evidence that is available to you support the narrative, how can you know otherwise?
Yes. Let's see here. So, somebody out there is actually taking the lead on combating this threat. There's a lot of people talking about combating the threat, but there's one man out there who's actually doing real, tangible things to win some of these battles, hopefully changing the tide of the war at some point. And that would be Mr. Governor and future President Ron DeSantis. On May 2nd, he signed a bill into law, barring Florida state officials from investing public money to promote environmental, social, and governance goals, prohibiting ESG bond sales. DeSantis says that many executives and investors have lost their focus on returns as they take growing account of issues like climate change and workforce diversity. Before he signed the bill, he said, "We want them to act as fiduciaries," which means to have money and profit for the person that you're investing on behalf at the forefront of your mind. And he said, quote, "We do not want them to engage in these ideological joyrides." And again, to further give you guys a definition of what fiduciary means is you typically, unless you're an investment professional yourself, you don't have time to go in and work the markets yourself. So you like your 401k, you pass that off to somebody like, say, like Fidelity Mutuals or something. And they have what's called a fiduciary responsibility. When you give them your money, they by law have to make the best financial decisions they possibly can with that. It's illegal for them to do things that they don't think are likely to result in profit because you've given them that money. It's not that they're supposed to be doing it on your behalf. They're not supposed to just be like, oh, thanks for the money, I'm going to go spend it on whatever frivolous thing I want. No, that's illegal. They have a fiduciary responsibility to generate profit for you. And that's a very important part of financial law. It's the only thing really kind of that kept the system together for so long. But ESG essentially violates fiduciary law. And so DeSantis signed in another law that reaffirms that. And that's a good thing. And we're starting to see kind of the turning points with that, where people are starting to use or consider using fiduciary responsibility laws to start combating some of these companies making ESG decisions that are not in the best interest of the investor, even though they by law are required to be making decisions in the interest of the investors.
Yep. So DeSantis is the one actually going and doing something.
Yeah, there's no substitute for winning.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not tired of that winning. There's no substitute for winning your elections and signing bills into law. There's no substitute for actually doing things and not just talking about them. Talking about doing things and complaining about how you're not allowed to do things. That is no substitute for doing the thing itself.
DeSantis has cleaned out people in his organization that don't support him. At the moment that they no longer are working for the people, he removes them. He's very active about it. Make sure he has a team that actually fits his goals. He, with the limited power he has as a governor, has done what seems like everything he can in his power to do what's best for the American people and the people in his state. And he does not do things super fast. I'll give him. Some people complain about how White needs to do this day one. Well, I think he has a very large team of lawyers that are working around the clock with him, trying to see how he can legally do what he needs to do so that it's defensible, and that's why he wins his court cases. Because everything he does, I don't know if you know this, but other states are challenging his state's policies in court. I'm not even sure why that's even legal, but he gets sued all the time to undo his policies, and he does a fairly good job of winning those cases.
Yeah. Well, and what's important is that he is winning them, he is doing them, and they're being done. Whether they're hard or they're not happening in exactly the way that maybe some people would want them to happen is really largely irrelevant to the fact that they are happening. and that other people who do a lot of talking about doing stuff are unable to actually get these things done. Again, there is no substitute for victory, and there's no substitute for actually doing the thing. That's, talking about it doesn't get it done.
Yeah. Now, speaking about the current frontrunner of the Republicans, we have Trump has been indicted again.
I feel like deja vu here.
That's what I said again. Obviously, he shouldn't have been indicted at all. But let's. I think it's your section.
Is it? Well,
Yeah.
Trump has been indicted
Shocker.
again on 7 counts of stuff. Was he like it's like a Sesame Street character? 1 indictment, 2 indictments, 7 indictments. In the special counsel's classified documents probe, we covered before how this case is completely without merit and totally ridiculous, and regardless of how you feel about Trump, obviously it's wrong for the DOJ to be doing this to him because there is no basis for it being done. And we'll summarize that a little bit again today. However, the big takeaway is that the FBI and the DOJ are further showing how corrupt and partisan they really are. The FBI and DOJ were caught rigging the election, subverting a rightfully elected president, and they are continuing to rig the next election. All things which are now allowed to be said on YouTube. Their actions further cement the truth that more and more people are coming to realize. The FBI needs to be disbanded if we wish to remain a free people. That is something I've been calling for like 5 years now.
You were ahead of the game.
I was definitely ahead of the game.
So we have at least 7 counts now that are not based on the idea that Trump mishandled classified documents. They're going to keep referring to, this is in relation to Trump mishandling classified documents. Actually, the Espionage Act does not require them to be classified, and it's important that they are doing that when they could have been. There are statutes they could be using regarding the handling of classified documents, but they know Trump's defense is that they weren't classified because he declassified them. So to avoid that defense, they're simply using a far more vague and also less sensible statute that refers to national documents related to national security, or the Espionage Act. They know that Trump is will rightfully argue that he declassified the documents, so that they don't want to use that line of argument. Instead, they're charging him with the Espionage Act, which covers the mishandling of documents important to national defense, and other counts including obstruction of justice, conspiracy, concealment, and false statements. All those, I think, we have already gone into before how they're ridiculous. And honestly, I think everyone knows this is a political hatchet job, and this is not a real legal case. It's not about finding justice.
But that's part of it, though, right? I think at this point now it's just about the wielding of the power. And it's largely irrelevant to the Democrats whether we know or don't know, and in fact they kind of like the idea. It probably titillates them a little bit that we all know that this is a corrupt action, but they're doing it anyways. At a certain point, it becomes just a matter of wielding the power for the sake of showing people that you can wield the power. It's a politics of fear and intimidation, and that's exactly what the Democrat playbook and the Marxist playbook has been throughout all of history.
So instead of defending Trump on each of these points, because we already have, and also it's pointless because they don't care about actually finding justice, we cannot just completely throw out this story entirely by comparing Trump to Hillary and Biden.
Yes. The irony is that the DOJ has not charged Biden, who has been found to have far more classified documents in 7 different unsecured locations, one of which was just in a garage, unlocked.
Yeah.
Such as the boxes that are in his garage that I just improv'd, and then Dyer also wrote that, so I didn't need to improv it. The FBI found that Hillary indisputably mishandled many classified documents on her unsecured private server. But she said that...
But they said...
But they said... Who are they, Dyer? Who are they? You talking about
The
the
FBI.
oh.
Comey, I think it was.
But they said that they did not find it necessary to charge someone of her status for those crimes because, as we all know, the way that the law is written in the U.S., the way the Constitution was intended, that if you are rich and powerful, laws don't apply to you.
Yeah, that was the most telling statement when I believe it was Comey was saying that no prosecutor would take up the case against someone like Hillary. But I know there's plenty of people.
Yeah, no prosecutor who wants to live.
Yeah, like okay, that might be telling too much of the story, right? Like it's like all the prosecutors are for fear for their lives.
Yeah, the FBI is afraid that they'll die too.
Exactly. But what she did substantively was far worse than what even they're accusing Trump of doing, and actually resulted in the death, most likely, of a lot of Chinese assets.
Well, and not just, the death is a bad thing, but from like a, geopolitical landscape thing, there's a certain amount of expectation that there'll be shrinkage in our human assets, unfortunately. But the real issue is that it wasn't just a couple of assets that died. She gutted the entire intel network that we had in China. Basically, after she did that, we completely lost our entire intelligence network in China, quickly followed by a rather dramatic rise in belligerence from China across the South China Sea, against Hong Kong, against their people, and now especially culminating in their seeming aggression towards Taiwan. All of that happened in the 6 to 7 years since Hillary, through her actions, gutted the entire intelligence network that we had based out of China, keeping track of all that stuff. There was very real, and there remains to be even more very real consequences to what she did.
Yes, and that's the only one country who she had her, government classified documents exposed to during her tenure as Secretary of State. Many more also had the opportunity to steal that information from her unsecured private server where she was doing official business, which, by the way, is far more of a crime, far more of a risk to national security than what they are even accusing Trump of doing. Of course, an indictment is not a finding of guilt. There's the famous statement that you can indict a ham sandwich, right? However, we know their goal is not justice. Their goal is obstruction. Ironically, they are trying to obstruct an election, which, I mean, didn't they get all upset about Jan 6 and that exact same thing? So the DOJ, working on behalf of Biden and the Democrat establishment, are trying to eliminate Trump from the election. Though I would rather have DeSantis, I do feel some kind of way of them trying to remove an option from us. They don't care about truth, just like in the Rittenhouse case and the Daniel Perry case. They will try someone for political reasons. It doesn't have to be our former president. It's all of us. They want to destroy all of us. And if we stand in the way of their political narrative, they will try us for crimes they know we are not guilty of. Yep. They want to find you guilty for political reasons.
And to be very clear here, the classified materials that Trump had in his possession inside of a locked room that was secured, a skiff that was secured by the FBI and the Secret Service, it included things like a letter to Trump from former President Obama, a letter that was public record, a letter from Kim Jong-un, a birthday dinner menu, and a cocktail napkin that had cocktail sauce on it.
Those are all listed as classified, by the way.
Yes. These and other so-called classified documents were stored in 15 boxes, locked in a skiff, installed by the Secret Service. Biden, on the other hand, and again, they were secured by the Secret Service in a room where you are allowed, a skiff where you're allowed to store classified material. It's the only place where you're allowed to store it. It was guarded by on-site Secret Service agents who were guarding the entire residence, and then further secured with a padlock by the FBI. So you know,
Pretty secure.
pretty secure. Biden, on the other hand, had 1,850 boxes of classified documents so far. Just found so far. Documents dating back to his time as a senator, and then to his time as vice president, stored in a garage. His crack-smoking son and his prostitutes had access to.
To be clear, is his son's prostitutes. I'm not saying it was Biden personally, his prostitutes. We just have.
But we're also not saying not.
Yeah.
Biden's.
All we're saying was we have pictures.
Nobody
of
knows who the
his
prostitutes were for.
and his prostitutes in the car coming out of the garage where you can clearly see the boxes. I'm not sure Biden wants to set the precedent, by the way, that former presidents are free to be prosecuted for political purposes, because he's kind of facing some legal troubles of his own. Which brings us to the next story. The FBI agent blows the whistle on the Biden crime family. We're going to give some updates on the Biden crime family, but it's worth noting that there's already been a pile of evidence and research into the Biden crime family. And
yeah, it was something that if you jump yourself back to 2018, the Biden crime family, that term itself was coined by the New York Times.
Right.
It was a well understood fact of U.S. politics for years that Joe Biden was up to no good. That was well established fact for years. Up until about 2018, when all of a sudden something happened.
Yeah, though they have so much dirt on him, of course they can control him, and that's why he's their man. It's recognized his entire family has become extremely wealthy off of his political office and him doing pay for play. It was not a surprise. He openly talked about it. He bragged about it in Ukraine. Doing it in Ukraine rather. So the Republican-led House Oversight and Accountability Committee has been investigating Biden and has received additional solid evidence regarding the Biden crime family's selling of government influence. I mean, in addition to the giant pile of evidence that we all were aware of but had to brain dump once he became the Democrat candidate for president. We already had emails from Hunter's laptop as well as prior business associates that showed that Biden used Hunter to profit from his office. Here are some of the recent updates. First off, the Biden family is suing the computer repair shop owner for releasing the evidence of their crimes. I don't know why that's legal to legally harass someone, try to bankrupt them because they blew the whistle on you that you had underage kids that you were, sleeping with, always taking naked pictures with, or the fact that you were receiving millions of dollars from companies and countries who are trying to buy influence from you. I actually think the first one's far worse, but we talk about the government influence one more. I don't know why. I think the fact that his son and he are pedophiles is a bigger problem. I don't know about you.
I think that they're somewhat related. There's a certain group that has dominated one of the 26 letters of the English alphabet. They have full control over it, apparently. But there's this group out there, and they seem to believe that there's a cabal of rich, powerful, politically connected elites out there.
We should ask Epstein about this.
Running rings of pedophilia. And as conspiratorial as that might sound, we seem to keep finding people who are rich and well-connected and political who are pedophiles. So,
all I'm saying...
I get what you're saying, Dyer. One of them's talked about a lot more than the other, but I seem to feel that they are indelibly connected to each other.
They're both very important. But we're about to, in this story, continue to talk about, his economic crimes. Just like every other podcast or every other news network that's going to even talk about the story, they're going to focus on their political and economic crimes. And they very few times they even brought up the fact that they victimized children. And though they're both important, I kind of want to foot stomp it because it's ignored. That there's solid evidence that his son was doinking kids, raping kids, and there's nothing happening about that.
Yeah.
Just saying.
It's almost like it's acceptable in the circles that they run in, and that the FBI doesn't really care when people like Hillary have classified emails that they're spreading all over the place, and they don't really care when people like Joe Biden's son are diddling kids.
It seems like a problem that right now when people say, "Hey, Mr. President," they don't actually say, "Hey, Mr. Pedophile President," or "Hey, your pedophile son Hunter." That it should be you should be just as angry or more angry about that aspect of the story.
You know who could do that? That could be Trump. Trump could go with Pedo Joe, and he could just run with it, and he could just keep it up the whole campaign. He could very easily do that.
Yeah, but we're gonna move on to like the economic crimes. But I just want to really foot stomp that. So James Comer was informed. He's the director of the FBI. No. James Comer was informed by an FBI. Sorry, James Comer is a Republican. Was informed by the FBI whistleblower that he's the leader of the House Oversight Committee.
Correct.
So James Comer was informed by an FBI whistleblower that the FBI had a official document, a 1023, that included the report from a reliable FBI human asset that claimed that Biden had received a bribe. Do you know how this asset knew that Biden had received a bribe for a policy decision?
How did he know?
The human asset who had evidence of Biden being bribed and then following through on a policy decision was the guy who bribed him.
Well, I mean, what does he know, Dyer? What does he know?
It's just a whole bunch of so that 1023 had a whole bunch of attachments to it.
That's just like your opinion, man.
All the evidence he has of him bribing Biden to make a policy decision, which he ended up doing, and he got the money for it. So pretty solid evidence. The FBI initially stonewalled the committee and then claimed they did not have such a document. It did not exist, according to the FBI. What bribery? Doesn't exist. Then Comer threatened to hold the FBI director in contempt of Congress if the document was not provided, and had to be provided unredacted by the 31st of May. FBI Director Christopher Wray only admitted the document existed once Comer, on a phone call, told him that members of the committee had already seen the document in its entirety and already knew about its contents, and that they were only asking him to provide it so it could be provided the legal way instead of through a whistleblower. And that is kind of a test to see how, they kind of, the FBI entraps people all the time by asking a question that they already know the answer to, hoping that they give the wrong answer.
Yeah, it did that to Flynn.
Yeah, that's what the Comey just did to him. He asked a question he already knew the answer to. Let Christopher Wray lie officially in official letters from the FBI, and now he has him in contempt of Congress. He can get charged with contempt of Congress whether or not he provides the documents now. It doesn't matter.
He should get charged with treason.
Yes, but Congress is not a law enforcement agency. It would be the DOJ that would charge him with other crimes that he's definitely committed. However, the DOJ is not going to do that because it's his friends, his boss. Right?
But I believe the Congress has impeachment powers. I believe that they could just keep impeaching. They could start with Merrick Garland, and then they could, whoever his deputy is that takes over, they could just keep impeaching him. Just keep going until they find somebody.
I think the 50-50 Senate is going to actually let those impeachments get through.
Yeah, they might. Give it a go.
Definitely.
That's an interesting question, and unfortunately, 55% of people who voted for Trump in Georgia did not go out and vote for the Republican senator 3 months later because Trump told them all that their vote doesn't matter. So unfortunately, yes, the answer as to whether or not the Senate would go along with that is probably no. And it's because, it's because Georgia voters suck, and they did not go back out to vote when they needed to.
I personally think that they should definitely do the impeachments, and that they should name and shame excessively with lots of ads to any Democrat who would vote against it, and use all the solid evidence of corruption and lies to say, hey, look at what your senator is supporting, and use that as ammunition in the next election. Whether or not they actually get impeached doesn't fucking matter. You're generating all of this content for them to support, all this corruption for those guys to support. And even average people will be like, wow, you voted that this person who obviously committed a crime shouldn't be impeached.
And you could potentially, it would be nice to see is FBI agents at that office resigning en masse. I mean, by the hundreds, and publicly stating that they are not going to work for somebody who is a criminal. Because that's not what they're supposed to be doing. You have the same thing at the DOJ, but it kind of seems like similar, like the corporations with their ESG hiring practices. It seems like the government agencies are pretty thoroughly infiltrated with agents who that's what they want. How am I supposed to judge the agents other than by their actions? And their actions are continued support of clear corruption and criminal activity by the heads of the FBI. And I can only sit here and think to myself that, well, the only evidence I have is that they must support that. We have not seen any kind of mass resignation or even small-scale resignation due to this. And that, in theory, not by law, but by hope and the moral fabric of the society that we're in, the hope is that it doesn't matter if the law, doesn't want to come hold them accountable. The people under them, the supposed theoretical patriots that are working in the FBI, are supposed to be a check and balance on this. And apparently that is no longer the case.
Yep. So
disband
Ray,
the FBI. Even the boots on the ground. It's all the way down to the janitor. All the field agents, they're all culpable in this.
There has apparently been a good number of whistleblowers who have brought stuff to Congress, and I'm thankful for them. This is just one of several, actually. But they represent a very tiny, minute amount of people in the FBI.
Where's his partner? Where's his office? Where's his analysts? Where's his boss? Where's the rest of the people that he works with? I mean, the FBI agents aren't they're not solitary individuals who are they're a cell unto themselves. They work in an office, they work with partners, they work with other groups. He probably was part of a class of 25 at Quantico that he came out of. I mean, where is the rest of them? You're right. Yes, great. We've got a whistleblower. I believe that we're up to 10 in the last year and a half.
Some of them have been off, by the way. I just want to point that out.
Most of them have been. Most of the whistleblowers, I believe, of the 10 whistleblowers who are not all FBI agents, but of the 10 whistleblowers who have information about the generalized topic of Biden family corruption, I think that there's only 3 who are still whereabouts known, and of the 7 where the whereabouts are unknown, some of them are known as dead, and then some of them have just disappeared.
Some of the whistleblowers, they are in one of 2 categories, it seems. Either they are dead or missing, or they are actively being pursued by other government agencies, retaliated against. So IRS going after them, criminal cases being taken against them, that just popped up as soon as they decided to be whistleblowers. They were caught for these other crimes that previously they weren't being charged with. So it seems very much like the Biden family and the Democrat Party is using the power of government, all the different powers of government and levers of government to go after them to try
and
to.
This goes with what I said earlier about with Trump. It's not about whether or not it's corrupt or that about it. They want you to know that it's corrupt. They want you to know that they have no boundaries on what they are willing to do to exercise the power that they have grabbed control of. And the other agents, all of this guy's buddies that I was just referring to, they all know that. They all know that they've seen the power of the state be wielded And they're probably sitting there doing the math and saying, well, I'd rather be on this side of it than on the receiving side, because they're cowards.
Yes, correct. The fact is that if you can hit them and make them bleed, if you are a threat to them, they will crush you or they will kill you. That is the fact. So we need to stop this organization, this corrupt crime syndicate that I would not characterize as a government anymore. Their actions are to oppress us for profit. That sounds like a crime syndicate, not a government to me. Then again, I guess probably splitting hairs. And to do that, it's going to take a lot of people willing to sacrifice, because they know fighting against this Leviathan will make them targets of the Leviathan. But if we don't do it, it will only grow. It will only gain more heads. It will only become more powerful to the point where there will be no one who could stand up to it. And we need a sledgehammer. We need a bull in a china shop. We don't need someone who will get into office and complain. So Wray offered to show the documents redacted in a skiff at an FBI headquarters. Comer, the head of the committee, responded that the documents, which are not classified to begin with, they're not classified documents, will be delivered to the House committee as ordered, or Wray will be held in contempt of Congress. Not redacted, not at FBI headquarters, at Capitol Hill. The FBI did eventually bring the Form 1023 to Capitol Hill, where it was viewed by the committee. The FBI claimed that they had restricted access to the documents, aka lied that it didn't even exist, to protect sources and methods. Yes, the sources and methods of protecting the Biden family, right? Christopher Wray should be in jail today. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Yes. Okay, so the committee, the Congressional Committee, has also secured the bank records from the Biden family that shows millions of dollars being funneled through 20 different shell companies from foreign nationals. The Oversight Committee has obtained thousands of pages of financial records revealing the Biden family and associates' complicated network of companies set up during Joe Biden's vice presidency and the millions the Bidens received from foreign sources. The financial records also reveal how Biden has used complicated transactions to hide payments from foreign nationals, including CCP-linked associates, and provided clear indications of influence peddling schemes during the then Vice President Biden's tenure.
What they meant by complicated transactions is they intentionally made the millions of dollars that they transferred into a bunch of very small payments. Or relatively small payments to try to hide what they were for.
Which is also known as money laundering.
Oh shit, is there a word for that?
Yes, there's a word for that. The act of taking dirty money from corrupt sources and running it through the ringer through 20 different shell companies until it becomes clean.
Gosh, I remember when it used to be 12
yeah.
companies that they were running through, and then they found more.
I don't do less than 25.
Oh, wow. What a high achiever.
Yes. Let's hear. So, quote, the Bidens intentionally sought it out, to hide and to confuse and to conceal their influence peddling schemes, but the bank records do not lie. The Bidens made millions from foreign nationals providing what seemed to be no services other than access and influence to the U.S. government. From the thousands of records that we've obtained so far, we know the Biden family set up over a dozen companies when Joe Biden was vice president. The Bidens engaged in many internationally complicated financial transactions to hide these payments and to avoid scrutiny. In at least one instance, the Bidens' CCP-linked associates took steps to conceal the source of their payments to the Bidens.
So,
yikes.
Just to be clear, there is no legitimate reason for money to be cycled through 20 shell companies. There's no excuse you could come up with that would explain that away. Companies that, by the way, seem not to actually produce any service or product.
Well, they produce money laundering services for the Bidens. I mean, it's pretty.
In
apparent.
fact, it would seem from looking at their records that they don't actually exist as a real company other than on paper and have the same inflow as they have outflow just to other members, right? Furthermore, it doesn't seem to make sense for a Chinese or a Mexican or a Ukrainian energy company, all three of which were happened, to have them pay millions of dollars to a fake company that was providing them no service in return. Why explain to me, would any of those three energy companies pay $1 million and expect nothing in return, and to send it to a company that isn't a legitimate company? Give me a legitimate reason for that.
Maybe it was like a rounding error or something, Dyer. Who knows how money works?
$10 million rounding error. Right. Lastly, there is no legitimate reason for this money to be funneled to family members of Joe Biden that had no contact or involvement with those companies the money is coming from. It is also important to note that the money that went to Hunter also commingled with Joe Biden's money because they shared a bank account. Interesting.
Quote unquote shared.
Right. So the Democrats famously accused, I don't know if you remember this, Fox, but Trump of doing pay for play.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
Because his family trust, which he had to give up his ownership of his companies when he became president, so he had no financial ties to the Trump brand and company. So that trust had hotels around the world, including in Russia. And those hotels earned money from people within those countries that lived there. And in Trump's case, he didn't see a single penny of that money. He did not coordinate that money. He didn't benefit from the investment in those companies. But they accused him of doing pay for play because people chose to rent rooms in hotels.
Yes. And they were actually being provided a service.
I fail to see where there's 20 companies he was laundering money through and
my favorite accusation of pay to play against the Trump administration was when Jared Kushner brokered like an absurd amount of peace throughout the Middle East, and then people said, he only brokered peace because he's Jewish and he thought it'd be profitable. I was like, yeah. Peace in the Middle East is profitable. What's the conflict of interest? Like, well, that's a conflict of interest. He's gonna make money off the fact that there's not the countries aren't just blown up to rubble, and that there's actually an economy and there's people living and surviving and thriving. That could be profitable. Yeah. Yes. Yes, that's the point. Bravo.
So I guess by that would mean that they view war as being profitable for them, possibly. I don't know. But I'm just shocked by anyone who could turn peace in the Middle East into a bad thing.
Yes, but Jared Kushner has a funny little hat that he wears sometimes, don't you know?
Yeah, I don't even feel like it's our responsibility to in any way try to achieve peace in the Middle East personally. Maybe to defend Israel, sure, if they're a good ally. But I think that if they want peace, it's going to require them to want it. And I don't want to spend our blood and treasure to affect that.
Well, speaking of peace, an industry which could be put at risk by too much peace is...
Put me out of a job, please.
The drag for... The drag shows for Direwolf industry could be put at risk. If there's less need for military intervention... That means that there might be less need for drag queens.
I think if there was less war around the world that was created by us and so forth, I think that they'd actually spend more time focusing on stuff that wasn't military related.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's funny now. So this is our next story here, is that the Pentagon has canceled drag shows on military facilities. It's funny to me that drag queens tried to get in on the military industrial complex and turn drag shows into, like buying a jet from Lockheed Martin where now the drag industry is part of the military-industrial complex. As military operations expand, they were hoping that drag shows would also expand. Very, very forward, progressive thinking on their part.
Yeah. It turns out that the rainbows make really poor camouflage, so that's why they did this.
Yeah, but that's why we've got supersonics, because the colors blend together, and then they're back to good camo. So
Exactly, right. You just got to be viewing it at supersonic speeds for it to be effective. All right, so the Pentagon will no longer allow shows involving drag performers to be hosted at military facilities. That doesn't mean they're going to stop having them. It says, to be clear, hosted at military facilities. Remember that. So a spokesman said Thursday that enforcing a long-standing policy amid intensifying pressure from Republican lawmakers to cancel the practice, Pentagon spokesman Sabrina whatever said in a statement, as Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has said, the DoD will not host drag events at U.S. military installations or facilities or ships. Hosting these types of events is in federally funded facilities is not suitable use of DoD resources.
yeah, and the undercurrent of all of that is that it's not only unsuitable use of DoD resources, it's also inappropriate for the family fun days that are supposedly what these events are for. Dyer, I don't know how specific you want to give. I know that you've talked before. Yet your base has, as many bases have, encourage family days for you and your buddies and their families to kind of get together and have fun. A lot of you guys have younger kids, and it's something for you guys to do as a community together. And you guys have like festivals and fairs and kind of fun sort of stuff going on. And more recently, they've started trying to incorporate drag shows into those events, which has caused a lot of service members to basically want to fully stop going and taking their family to these events because you don't want to expose your children to adult men stripping in front of them.
So it is part of military culture to help to build a team, a cohesive team, to have events where people outside of work can relax and have families involved. There is regularly a monthly, at least once per month, often more often than just once a month, there'll be a party of sorts either at the wing, group, or squadron level, or if you're in the Army, it's battalion and so on forth. That where they're trying to create camaraderie, right? And then
which is crucial for morale. Currently across all branches, morale is at all-time lows right now. So anything to increase morale is seen as a positive and a necessary thing that needs to be done. So if there's something that's happening that would prevent you from wanting to engage and partake in a morale-building exercise, that's probably a pretty bad thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. So these events are important. So degrading them would be a serious blow to morale also. So within the 6 months of me getting to my current base, there was a performance that I did not take my kids to, thankfully, because I was at work late and was unable to get home to pick up my kids. I fully intended on doing so. But I drove by it, saw what was happening, immediately went and talked to my leadership, said about what had happened. And when I had my other members confirm to me exactly what had happened, was basically there was a drag performer who was barely clothed, cursing at the audience and being extremely vulgar. And right in front of the stage was the young kids' bounce house.
Yeah, because this was supposed to be an event for service members, their family, and their children of all ages.
That was advertised to me and everyone else on base to bring your family to. This is a kid-friendly a party. They had to specifically say that because there's so many military events where it's the military guys getting together, so there's going to be some drinking and stuff, right? So they specified this is family-friendly, and then they had that event. And I made a massive stink about it, going all the way up to the base leadership and demanded action or said it would be getting reported through the IG. And so it is an ultimatum: give me an appropriate response, or this is being reported. And I did get a response, and they haven't had a drag show on base since. I had a whole lot of people, thankfully, in my leadership who put their weight behind me, because had I gone on it alone, I probably would not have got the response I got. But I went through the chain. I didn't go straight to the wing leadership. I went to my direct leadership, and then to my group's leadership, and my wing leadership, and said, "Hey, are you going to sign in on this? Are you going to put your name on this as well? Are you going to be brave?" I simply said that. I said, "Hey, it requires us to be good leaders, to do to stand up and say when our other leaders are doing something wrong, even when it's hard, right? But this is wrong. This is objectively wrong. We cannot allow this. Is a violation of. I listed the policies as a violation of. I explained how it was. The effects was. I personally know, but also I'm not fucking taking my kids to any wing event ever at the space because of this experience. You can't fix that, right? My family are not comfortable with it.
Because there was broken trust, and so now you've got, and again, this is something that's been happening. Unfortunately, you're not a unique situation. This has been happening on dozens to hundreds of bases all across the world. Yes. And it's similar to your situation. Service members of all the branches are having similar situations and had similar actions that they tried to take, and oppose this. But for right now, the effect of that has been, in a low morale environment that we're in right now with the military, you now have, rightfully so, no trust in your base to be able to bring your children and your family to a morale building event.
Does not feel safe.
And so now they've disrupted that. They've continued to disrupt the morale into the future.
My kids only go to events that I personally planned, because I know it's going to be there, right?
Yes.
But that's sad. It's sad that I can't trust my own base leadership to produce a family-friendly event that my family can go to and feel safe.
Yes. So again, this very sterile quote from Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin that, well, hosting these events in federally funded facilities is not a suitable use of DoD resources. Well, yeah, I would say that specifically creating an environment of mistrust in morale-building exercises, encouraging service members to avoid morale-building exercises. And I would say that, yeah, that's probably not a suitable use of DoD resources. And that's probably the most clean way that you could possibly say that. It's the most euphemistic way that you could say that.
Anyways, if you think this is a sign that the military is becoming less woke, don't get too excited.
Oh.
The military is still pursuing, the least military leadership, pursuing a woke agenda. They are only slowing their woke push in this one area because the drag shows got too much bad press. They got too many people giving pushback. They had too many military members filing official reports and threatening to go to the IG if this happened again. Okay, we're getting a little bit of heat across a bunch of different bases. I wasn't the only one that had a situation like this, apparently. I'm good. It's good to know.
Yeah,
right?
Hopefully that makes you feel better. I mean, hopefully everybody else who was, feels the same way as you across all the bases, across all the branches, hopefully they feel a little bit better too, that, they're not alone.
In the last 3 years, apparently. There was one in Nellis at 21 that got a bunch of complaints because, again, just like what happened to me, military members went to an event and did not realize it was going to be that. So the reports piling up, these reports, I think what really made the effect, was most effective, was that these reports went to Congress as well, as did mine, actually. I sent it to my congressman. And then our congressman went and questioned the DOD leadership once the Republicans got in charge and were able to get a committee to address it. So going back to whether or not the military is still woke, they referred to a policy that already existed but is routinely ignored. The DOD ignored this policy to allow drag shows on bases the same way that they ignore the same policy when they allow bands to provide shows on bases for morale, right? So you will not use government facilities for non-government reasons. That policy is not followed for when it comes to morale events. it can't be followed because you would never have any guest performance on a base. It'd have to be all done by military members, which a lot of it is. We like that does happen, but
yeah, but bringing in like the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, or some country singer or comedian, that's kind of like, especially during all the deployments during the 2000s and the 2010s. I mean, that was kind of the cliche, the bread and butter of what kept everybody going over there.
Right. So I remember when I was deployed, we've had multiple entire what's the word we have much bands play? It's a freaking
concert.
We had full of concerts on the base with artists coming in, and like a bunch of artists playing all night, and that was people using government facilities for a non-government reason, using government money essentially for those non-government purposes. So they're not going to follow this, and they're saying, "Oh well, this has always been our policy," but obviously you weren't following it.
I mean, I think you can continue to do that stuff under the policy, though, because I think morale building can be considered to stretch underneath of that policy. However, because this is having the opposite effect, this is having the effect of reducing morale, it then becomes against that policy.
We have so many people getting out, and so fewer people wanting to join because of it. This has damaged the view of the military and will damage the type of candidates we have joining for a long time. I don't know if you can fix this this impression within a generation. What do you think?
It's going to take a while. And currently right now, I mean, there's not even it's not even getting started. So, I mean, you have to get it started first. I don't know. I mean, they were able to warp it in 10 years. I think, you guys have kind of quick generations. It's kind of like, 4 to 6 years is kind of the typical across all the branches. It's kind of like high school, kind of like college, where you've got these 4-year generations, and over the course of 4 years, you've totally swapped out most of the people there.
That's if you change out the leadership, because the leadership could be them for 15 years, right? So you change out the leadership, and the people below them, that could change quickly.
Yeah. So that would be the issue then, is swapping out the leadership, and then as soon as 4 years after, I think you could warp the culture back.
Yeah. So the DoD is still holding LGBT events. And they still have DEI events and offices that are creating policy, right? Until those things are stopped, it's not going to change the culture.
Well, it's a recruitment strategy even, which is weird.
Yeah. In any case, your section.
This statement, however, was based on complaints and reports from military members across many bases over the last 3 years. It also resulted in Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alaska, who expressed outrage over the issue of sending a May letter to Chief of the Naval Operations, Michael Gilday.
Remember Gilday?
Yeah, he was the one who he had books or something he wanted the sailors.
Yeah, he had Kendi, the what's his face, Kendi.
Oh yeah, Ibram X. Kendi's racist book. Yeah, and they were I think that was the same hearing where Milley was talking about wanting to know more about white rage.
Yes, correct.
I don't know. I mean, that sounds like something you guys want concentrated. Yeah, that's the whole point of the military is
supposed to be focusing
rage.
that. Yeah, come on.
Yeah, anyways, so he wanted the names of the officers responsible for funding and promoting drag queen performances aboard naval vessels, and the House Republicans sent a letter to Austin in May calling on him to put an end to drag events in the military. So, really, it wasn't the outrage across multiple service members, led by people like Dyer, on base after base after base, saying, "Hey, you are putting my family in danger at these events. I will not. This is not acceptable." The military leadership really just did not give a fuck about that. It was when Congress, who controls their purse strings, when they finally got involved, which does, again, go to show that elections have consequences. There is no substitute for winning. There's no substitute for talking about doing something. There is only the doing of it. And thankfully, the Republican-held Congress right now is, in their own special way, trying to do something, and they are getting a reaction out of the military leadership right now.
I think it was less like to some degree there was a change due to military members pushing back against their leadership, as I had. But I think the much greater effect was those same reports. Just like I gave my report to my congressman, they were flooded with reports of this happening, and that's why Congress was motivated to take action. That's why Senator Tom Tuberville from Alabama, that's why he knew, he came with the receipts of saying, no, this is happening at this base, this base, this base. Why are you funding this? Who's responsible for it? Give me names. And once the DOD is being told, hey, I want names of people to be held accountable, they're like, oh, we are not doing this anymore. Officially. Right? So it was people setting up and saying, no, not in my house, not in my base, not in my squadron. Right? It was that, but it was a roundabout way by going through Congress. And like you said, that top cover only happened because we won an election.
Yep. Let's see here. So the lawmakers, the Republicans, in their letter, they wrote, quote, "We should be focusing on deterring China and other adversaries, not drag shows, which do nothing to enhance our deterrence and warfighting capabilities." And I'll further add again, it's not just that it doesn't enhance, it is a detriment. It's a detriment that you have guys like Dyer who don't feel comfortable going to morale events and bonding with your fellow service members. That is broken parts of the culture in the military that are directly attributable to their success, and it's really hard to repair that. And that is what the Democrats have done here. They have done tangible things to make our fighting forces less effective.
Yep. This is only one example of that.
It's almost like our adversaries paid for Joe Biden to make the U.S. less effective of an adversary for them.
You know what? They talk about in race realism, or not race realism, the critical race theory. They talk about in critical race theory a lot that the outcomes are proof of malice and of racism, right? The outcome, the simple that there is a disparity of black people and white people in any area, that would be a positive thing. If they don't have equal positive representation, that must be because of racism. Well, I would say, I don't care if you have solid evidence that Biden was paid to make our military weak. All I know is he got paid and our military got weak. The outcome was self-evident, right? So I'm going to blame him for it. He's paid by foreign governments for flawless decisions. I don't care if there's a direct evidence this was one of them, because this was the effect of him being in office.
Yep.
I'm going to hold him accountable for the outcome, whether or not you prove it or not. Hey, they don't require us. They don't require there be proof for the things they're accusing us of, right?
Well, of course not. I mean, proof is
this is the
white supremacist concept. Alrighty. Well, anything else to say there?
Nope, that is our last story.
That is our last story. So that was the show. Thank you guys for joining us. We're happy to be back. There were some technical difficulties, and we'll just chalk it up to YouTube saying that YouTube sucks. Really, it was Twitch, but it was YouTube. We went through a pretty harrowing journey the last couple of weeks. We thought we basically lost all of the scenes for the show, and so we've been trying to recover those, and we finally got them back. And
it's not 100% yet.
Yeah, it's not 100%, which is why we didn't have the intro videos today. But we most of it was recoverable, and then we have some patchwork to do to get it.
I don't think donation applications are working, so someone may have donated to us and we wouldn't have known, right?
It's entirely possible, though not likely.
Someone should definitely test it.
Yeah, we'll get back on track with that next week. But thank you guys for having us back here. We're happy to be back. Been a while.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah, we will definitely see you next week.
Direwolf out.
All right, Javiz signing off.